life, you become pure. You become precious, innocent. When you eat from the tree of life, you become virgin and chaste. The tree of life is immaculate and clean. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become immaculate. You become clean. The tree of life is unblemished. When you eat from the tree of life, it means that you become unblemished. The tree of life is spotless. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you actually become spotless and unspotted. Why? Because you study all that unspotted is. And you master all of the attributes of being unspotted. And you actually become that. As Matthew 5:48 requires us to be perfect as our Father Yahweh is perfect. So the tree of life is perfect as you're hearing these words come out from me to you. The tree of life is stainless. When you eat from the tree of life, you become stainless. The tree of life is taintless. So when you eat from the tree of life, you become taintless. The tree of life is untainted. You therefore become untainted. The tree of life is also unsullied. So when you eat from the tree of life, you become unsullied. The tree of life is an unsoiled tree. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become unsoiled. The tree of life is untarnished. All of the words of the tree of life are untarnished. When you eat the words of the tree of life, you therefore become untarnished. This is your character, an untarnished character. The tree of life is undefiled. When you eat from the tree of life, you become undefiled. Your language is undefiled. Your attitude is undefiled. The tree of life is unscathed. When you eat from the tree of life, you become unscathed. When you eat from the tree of life, you become undefaced because the tree of life is undefaced. The tree of life is unimpaired. When you eat from the tree of life, you are unimpaired. You are what you eat. You become unimpaired. And all that unimpaired is. The tree of life is unaltered. There's nothing grasped about the tree of life. Nothing is allowed to grow on the tree of life as a graft. So it's unaltered and unmingled. And when you eat from the tree of life, you are unaltered. You are unmingled. So you have to be born again to enjoy the tree of life. You have to make a choice between 6,000 years of the tree of good and evil and what you see around you today, or to take on this new life and eat from the tree of life, which is unblended, so that you will become unblended. The tree of life is undiluted. So when you eat from the tree of life, you are undiluted. The tree of life is unalloyed. You know what an alloy is, when you mix one metal with another metal to accomplish maybe more strength or some other thing. But you have pure strength from the tree of life, and you become unalloyed. The tree of life is plain, and you become plain. Nothing falsely decorated about you. The tree of life is impeccable. So when you eat from the tree of life, you become impeccable. The tree of life is irreproachable. When you eat from the tree of life, you become irreproachable. And think about this. The tree of life is unlimited. Isn't that wonderful to know that there is a tree that has fruit that's unlimited, that you have free access to, and therefore you can become unlimited? The tree of life is unrestricted. So when you eat from the tree of life, you study all there is about being unrestricted, and you become that. The tree of life is unbounded. So when you eat from the tree of life, you become unbounded. Something else that is fabulous about the tree of life is that it is infallible. Infallible. And guess what? You can become infallible as you eat from the tree of life. The tree of life is unquestionable. It does not mean that you don't have questions. It's just unquestionable. It's perfect. And you become just like that, unquestionable. The tree of life is positive, period, positive. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become positive. The tree of life is undeniable. When you eat from the tree of life, you become undeniable. And the tree of life is indisputable. When you eat from the tree of life, you become undisputable. You have the opportunity to become fundamental because the tree of life is fundamental. All you need to do is eat from the tree of life, and you will enjoy being fundamental. The tree of life is essential. It is absolutely essential. And you too are essential when you eat from the tree of life. You become essential. The tree of life is real. There's nothing like having the opportunity to know what real is. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become real. The tree of life is genuine. And when you eat from the tree of life, you too become genuine. The tree of life is demonstratable. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become demonstratable. Also, the attributes of the tree of life have been tried and proven, and therefore they are demonstrated. And when you eat from the tree of life, you too will be demonstrated before the world as being eternal, an eternal being. The tree of life is appropriate. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become appropriate. The tree of life is fitting. When you eat from the tree of life, you become fitting. The tree of life is proper. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become proper, and you become one of the invited, honored guests of the first fruits of Feast of Weeks, the harvest, those for whom this special meal is prepared. This is a special meal that is prepared for all of you who choose to eat from the tree of life. You have the blessing to be the honored guest at the marriage supper. For the tree of life is suitable, and when you eat from the tree of life, you become suitable to attend the marriage supper with the Lamb and all the wise virgins. You can see that these certainly are wise virgins that eat from this tree. The tree of life is legitimate. You eat from the tree of life, you become legitimate. The tree of life is actual, and you become actual when you eat the words of the tree of life. The tree of life is also factual, and you too become factual when you eat the words of the tree of life. The tree of life is true, and you become true. All about you becomes true. Your character is true. Your words are true as you eat from the tree of life. The tree of life is veritable, and you too become veritable when you eat from the tree of life, the words of the tree of life. The tree of life is authentic. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become authentic. The tree of life is verifiable. And when you eat from the tree of life, when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become verifiable. The tree of life is unmistaken from any other tree in the midst of the garden on the planet Earth. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become unmistaken as the righteous, as an angel of Yahweh, as a god and goddess of Yahweh. Unmistaken. The tree of life is reliable. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become reliable. You become a prize, a jewel in the crown of the Son of Yahweh. You become one that everybody wants to work in their business with them. The tree of life is accomplished. And when you eat the words from the tree of life, you become accomplished, an accomplished person in all that you do. It doesn't matter what you do, whether that's music or whether it's in any field of endeavor. The tree of life is efficient, absolutely efficient. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become efficient. The tree of life is skilled. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become skilled. The tree of life is skillful. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become skillful in all of your endeavors, in all of your life, and whatever you do. Whatever you choose to do, you become skillful. The tree of life is polished. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become polished. You become suave, debonair, savoir-faire. The tree of life is mature. So when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become mature. The tree of life is able. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, then you are resurrected as Abel. Abel was slain 5,996 years ago, and now Abel is being resurrected. The tree of life is capable. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become capable beyond your belief. The tree of life is adroit. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become adroit. The tree of life is dexterous. And when you eat from the tree of life, you become dexterous. And there's no question that the tree of life is adept. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become adept. The tree of life is qualified. When you eat from the tree of life, you become qualified. You gain the power to qualify yourself in whatever you want to do. The tree of life is disciplined. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become self-disciplined. You become a self-starter. You do not need someone to awaken you to work or to do your job or to do what you are born to do, fulfilling your purpose. There's an honest guest at the Feast of Weeks. The tree of life is well equipped. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become well equipped. The tree of life is well grounded. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become well grounded. The tree of life is masterful. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you become masterful. You have the greatest opportunity on earth to become an expert, to be expert, to actually be expert, simply by eating words of the tree of life. You can be the most proficient being in existence. You now have access to the tree of life, which is proficient. You can be gifted, as you choose to be gifted, in whatever area of life that you want to be gifted, simply by eating from the words of the tree of life. You can be well endowed. It's your choice to be well endowed. For the first time in your life, you have the choice of being well endowed by choice, simply by choosing to eat the words of the tree of life, which is well endowed. Thus, you can be talented, because the tree of life is talented. The tree of life is performed. So you can perform. You can be one who performs to perfection by eating the words of the tree of life. The tree of life is execution. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you can execute. No question about that. The tree of life is established, means to establish. And when you eat from the words of the tree of life, you're able to establish whatever you wish in righteousness up on this planet, or on any other planet, in the universe, in the galaxy. You will be unlimited. The tree of life means to develop. And when you eat the words of the tree of life, you will be able to develop.